Hello, I'm R J Dent. I'm in my library and we're going to be looking at the works of Ezra Pound, poet, essayist, didacticist. Where do we start with Pound? He's a troubling figure because in his early career he was a wonderful poet, wrote beautiful poetry, very insightful essays, and then later on, of course, started dabbling with fascism and changed very much, and his writing became difficult and problematic and less elegant than it had been originally when he first started. He was also very generous to his to other literary figures. He helped boost the careers and forward the careers of James Joyce, Ernest Hemingway, T.S. Eliot, H.D. Many people owed their careers to the initial promotion and support of Ezra Pound. So let's have a look at his well, I've got selected poems here. Ezra Pound's selected poems with an introduction by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot actually giving something back to Pound there. As you may know, the Wasteland by T.S. Eliot was significantly edited by Ezra Pound. In fact, some critics have argued that Ezra Pound actually wrote some of it, and the Wasteland as we have it today exists in the form it exists because of Ezra Pound. So here we have Eliot introducing Ezra Pound's selected poems. It's a selection made by Pound himself. The next one I've got is the collected shorter poems. Now this is a particular favourite of mine because it's got most of the selected poems in it and some other ones from earlier in his career, so I particularly like that one. This is the one that's got the important poems in, so it's got Hugh Selwyn Mobley, it's got poems from Persona, it's got Cathay, which are the Chinese translations, homage to Sextus Propertius, which is the Catullus translation, adaptation. It's not really a literal translation, it's got some of Pound's own stuff in it. It's as it says, it's a homage. Hugh Selwyn Mobley, very famous. Really, this is Pound's Wasteland, if you like. And then cantos, which are notoriously difficult. Anyway, we'll come on to those now. So then we've got Ezra Pound's cantos. Now this, like James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, is one of those modernist books that's difficult to read. As you can see, we end up with Chinese pictographs there, and if you don't know what they mean, it's quite difficult. But having said that, there's some beautiful poetry in here. There's a lot of stuff in here that's not good poetry as well, and it's very difficult to pick out. It's difficult to go through it and you're just looking for the gems, and there are gems in there. Personally, I think Pound should have gone through it and edited out all of the chaff and just left us with the jewellery. Anyway, to mix my metaphors. Selected cantos. This is quite good because it really has got, it's a draft of 30 cantos, and they're good. It's a nice selection. And this one here, drafts and fragments of cantos. Which is it's interesting. It's worth reading. This is a particular favourite of mine here. The translations of Ezra Pound. And then what we've got is because Ezra Pound did an awful lot of translations, and some very good ones. So what we've got the No Plays, we've got the Seafarer, we've got Cathay, we've got the Arnaud Daniel poems. There's pretty much the Cavalcanti poems. There's pretty much everything in here that Ezra Pound translated, and as you can see, it's a huge, nearly 450 page book of translations. Of course, they're very Ezra Pound. While we're on translations, of course, Ezra Pound also translated this, The Women of Trachis by Sophocles. It's a play, ancient Greek drama, and it's a very powerful translation. We then have the literary essays of Ezra Pound, edited with an introduction by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot still repaying the debt. And then we've got a whole series of essays on a variety of authors, Henry James, Gaumont, Lionel Johnson, the Renaissance, Arnaud Daniel, A. Hausman, D.H. Lawrence, Robert Frost, T.S. Eliot, Wyndham Lewis, James Joyce's Ulysses and Dubliners, and William Carse Williams. So you've got some and the thing with Pound is that his essays are very informative, and you do find yourself either agreeing with or incredibly disagreeing with his points. Guide to Culture, there, Ezra Pound again writing a whole series of essays on pretty much everything. Again, a whole range of essays about the culture that Ezra Pound found himself to be in. Ezra Pound also was very interested in the works of the Chinese writers, particularly he thought Confucius's works were particularly important, and so we've got the classic anthology defined by Confucius. Okay, and if I give you an indication of what this is, Ezra Pound, whom T.S. Eliot called the inventor of Chinese poetry for our time, here recreates for the English-speaking world the great poetry of ancient China. The 305 odes of the classic anthology are the living tradition in Chinese poetry. Since the 5th century before Christ, they have been as familiar to every literate Chinese as the Homeric poems were to the ancient Greeks. Pound's translation of the classic anthology is the culmination of 40 years of Chinese study, which began with Cathay and continued through the Chinese cantos, the unwobbling pivot, and the Confucian analects. Okay, so it's an anthology of Chinese poetry translated into English by Ezra Pound, and they're beautiful. They're really beautiful, and they are also very Ezra Pound. I'm going back to what we just mentioned in there. The other texts, the unwobbling pivot, the Great Digest, and the analects. Okay, so this is, as it says here on the blurb, the study of Chinese culture was a dominant concern in Ezra Pound's life and work. Okay, and so there we have it. So now the basic texts that he translated have been assembled in one volume, and here they are. So again, it's Chinese literature at its finest, brought to us by Ezra Pound. And then finally, Ezra Pound, as many authors have said, put forward the idea that to be a great writer you need to read a lot. Everyone's said this. There are so many writers that have said it, whether they be writers of what is now considered to be literature or popular fiction. Charles Dickens said it. Recently in an interview, Stephen King said it, of all people. So, Ezra Pound is saying, you can't be, no poet was ever a more passionate, tireless or generous guide than Pound. But the art of writing, he insisted, can only be acquired in conjunction with the art of reading. And he was concerned with what his pupils read and how they read it. Alright, so there we have it. So there are the works of Ezra Pound that I have got in my library.